Yuri Scherbak is a Ukrainian writer, epidemiologist, and diplomat. Born in Kiev in 1934, his family was evacuated from Ukraine during World War II. Shortly after the war, Yuri's brother Mykola, a zoologist and head of the Zoological Museum of the Ukrainian Academy of Sciences, was imprisoned for 6 years for supporting Ukrainian nationalism. Scherbak graduated from the Kiev Medical Institute in 1958 and for the next 30 years worked as a researcher at the El Goromashevsky Research Institute for Epidemiology, contributing to the treatment of cholera outbreaks in Ukraine and Uzbekistan. Following the collapse of the USSR, Scherbak became the first leader of the Green Party of Ukraine, as well as becoming Minister of National Environment Protection between 1991 and 1992. In 1968, he published his second book, From the Chronicles of the City of Yaropol. Contemporary readers would certainly have been confused when they read the introduction by the quote-unquote editor, which is dated to the 29th of November, 1998, a full 30 years is in the future from the book's original publication date. This fake chronicle, presented as if written in the future, is actually a collection of stories centering around the fictional Ukrainian city of Yaropol. However, despite what one could think at first glance, this is not satire, and the futuristic aspect is not employed, as so often is the case, to give a satirical glint of futuristic idealism to contemporary issues and thus to make fun of them subtly. Instead, this book is a collection of what would be called urban fantasy stories taking place in the quote-unquote real world. In the first story, we have a circus coming to town right after the conclusion of the Second World War. After some preliminary shenanigans, the great magician Alfred Makarono shows up and presents an illusion to the assembled crowd to distract them from their worries. But a child, seeing an image of his mother and father in the magical illusionary sphere that Makaronov conjures up, disturbs his illusion and calls out the wizard, asking if he knows where his family is. The wizard mocks and tortures the child, who proceeds to undermine the magician's will and makes him leave the city along with the rest of the circus. The second tale, taking place after World War I, during the Russian Civil War, has the president of the local Yaropol Republic try to requisition a horse from a private breeder's stable. However, the engineer Monjar prefers to set his horse on fire while alive rather than to give it over to harsh labor. The third story is a mix of fantasy with modern settings and instruments. A man's son disappears during his flight as a pilot, and his father builds himself a strange vehicle that can travel on land and on water, and is seen as a gaunt spirit running through the night for years on end, crashing through forests and running over the surface of the ocean as far as Vietnam and Japan, constantly calling out his son on the radio. The fourth story alone should be proof enough this collection is not meant to be humorous nor to be read by children. In it we have the Ukrainian Professor Holodny and the former German Nazi minor official and doctor of philosophy Gerhard Stubnagel digging ditches in a concentration camp, while Professor Holodny ponders where the other calories necessary for his continued survival come from, when compared with how little food he is getting and how he is using the energy gained from it. While Stubnagel eventually gets selected for extermination and gets shoved into a cart running into the cremation oven, while Stubnagel is still alive, screaming out Heil Hitler's and raising his arm in the Hitler salute, which temporarily makes it unable for him to be shoved in the cremation oven. The fifth story relates how a French woman coming to Yaropol falls in love with a local man, and as they are about to part at the train station, they are somehow suddenly transformed into a stone pillar mid-embrace for people to hang train station notices on. The final story features the child from the first story, grown up, now a world-famous boxer whose blood has healing abilities, and who gives up his shot at the World Championship title in order to save a heavily injured person. Sadly, unless you know Ukrainian or happen to have lived in the Eastern Bloc and had the book translated for your region at some point, you'll likely be unable to read this rather whimsical collection. I really wish it had come to the notice of Western publishers and got a proper English translation.